So the League of Women Voters is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and we advocate for empowering voters and strengthening democracy. And we strive to be a reliable source of good, nonpartisan information on important topics today. So we want to welcome you tonight. And I'll just repeat again, this is the League of Women Voters of Vermont and the Secure Our Vote Coalition seminar on the myth and facts of mobile voting. Um, in the League with voting, we particularly look for, there's an acronym, SURAT. We want to make sure that voting is secure, accurate, recountable, accessible, and transparent. And because of issues with a number of those factors, the League of Women Voters of Vermont is taking a position against mobile phone voting. And tonight we've brought a marvelous panel for you of very qualified and informed panelists to tell you more about the issues surrounding this important thing that is, there are two bills in the Vermont Senate and in the House now. So I'm sure that you would like to know more about it. Let me tell you a little bit about our panel. We have Susan Greenhall, who's from the People for Free Speech. I'm going to get that. And
Free speech for people. I know it's a
Free Speech for
mouthful,
People. Thank you.
but it's a good sentiment.
It's good sentiment. And we have Kini Fairchild, who co-directs Public Citizens Democracy Campaign. We'd like to welcome C.Jay Coles from Verified Voting. He's the Deputy Director of Legislative Affairs. And we're proud to have Lisa Danitz, who is an advisor with the Brennan Center for Justice, and has been working on voting rights and election administration, money in politics, as a lawyer for 25 years. Also, we'll have John Odom. You may know him as the elected city clerk of Montpelier, and he also has a good background as a certified hacker with some of these internet and network defense architect certification issues that are very relevant when we consider whether this type of voting is safe to implement. And so, with that introduction underway, I think I'm handing it off to Susan.
Think me.
I'm thinking hand it off.
Actually, I think Akini's going to talk a little bit
Okay.
about our
Oh,
coalition.
okay. Thank you,
Hi,
Akine.
everybody. My name's Akine. Great to be with you. I'm a huge fan of Vermont. It's my first state as a democracy organizer that I was able to work in around the town meeting process, and just really appreciate all our Vermont members. So Public Citizen and every group that's been invited to this call, Free Speech for People, Brennan Center for Justice, Verified Voting, we're all part of a coalition called Secure Our Vote. And it's a coalition of primarily voting advocacy groups, voting rights groups, and folks who really work hard day in and day out to make sure our democracy works for everyone and that everyone gets their voice heard. Um, the Secure Our Vote Coalition is focused on making sure every vote that's cast is counted and that our elections are secure from hacking and computer error. So that means making sure people have access to mark a ballot either by hand or with an assistive device and verify that the ballot that's going to be counted reflects their choices and that our elections elect the people that we intend to elect as a collective. So thank you so much for inviting us. It's such a pleasure to be with you. And I am going to pass it on to C.J., I believe.
Now it's my turn. All right.
Mhm.
Thank you, Kane and Jonna as well. So my name is C.J. Coles. As mentioned, I'm with the nonpartisan nonprofit Verified Voting. And we have sort of a unique view within this space. We were founded by computer scientists, so we really focus on technology that is deployed in the election ecosystem and ensuring that right, it is safe and secure. And so when we talk about this topic tonight, and there are many ways to describe what this topic is. You'll hear, you may have heard the terms internet voting or electronic ballot return or mobile voting or online voting. All of those are synonyms. They all mean the same thing. And I think you probably hear most tonight the term mobile voting because that's what is being discussed in Vermont. And so I just want to set the stage for exactly why we're here and what we're talking about. So as Jonna mentioned, there are a couple pieces of legislation that have been introduced in Vermont that would allow for mobile voting, which is returning voted ballots using a mobile app to return those voted ballots. There is an effort underway to allow that to happen or to allow cities or towns or villages to vote to adopt this option as an option for the communities to use mobile voting within their local elections. That's what the pieces of legislation would allow for if they were to be passed. And you'll hear more from my colleagues here on this webinar about why really that is not a very good idea, why that is risky, why it's insecure, and it's not safe. You'll hear more about that here in a few minutes. But I wanted to highlight that there is a group called the Mobile Voting Project. That's really where this is stemming from in Vermont. And this organization right, is out advocating for the allowance for mobile voting to take place, for voters to be able to submit their voted ballots through electronic transmission. It's important to note that that sort of the biggest benefactor of this organization is a man called Bradley Tusk. You may or may not have heard his name before. He was very involved in Uber and helping Uber get started across the country and meeting with local regulatory boards to allow Uber to come in and use that service in the locations across the country now. So very successful in that effort. And he has turned his attention to mobile voting, which he believes will reduce barriers to the ballot and will increase turnout. Now, evidence does suggest that neither of those things are true. However, it is a mission of his, and so the Mobile Voting Project is an organization in which he helps fund to go out and advocate for mobile voting, for electronic return. So that's why we're here tonight, is because that effort is taking place. It's a very concerted effort taking place in Vermont, and our organizations, as has been mentioned, oppose the advancement of mobile voting due to some very significant security risks to voted ballots. Again, as you'll hear more from. So, just wanted to set the stage for why we're here, why we're having this webinar. This is taking place in Vermont. There has been one committee hearing already on this. On one of the pieces of this legislation, and so it's happening right now in Vermont. These discussions are taking place, so that's why we're here to help educate about this process this evening. So I think with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Lisa at the Brennan Center.
Thanks, C.J., and hello, everybody. Fellow New Englander here from the Boston area, though, sadly, I am a Flatlander. I do love Vermont. You will actually hear from me twice today, and taking together, I'm basically going to share with you why, even though voting accessibility is at the core of Brennan Center's work, we oppose the adoption of mobile voting. Every independent review of mobile voting has found that we lack the technology to make it secure from attack, and therefore it risks the integrity of our elections. I'm going to give you a quick rundown of those reviews, which have been from national security and homeland security agencies, as well as other experts. I also want to note, in case it's necessary, that these federal government reports were issued before what I'll call the recent dismantling of the federal government. So just wanted to highlight that. In 2020, and again in 2024, there was what we colloquially call the four-agency report for federal national security, cybersecurity, law enforcement, and election-related federal executive branch agencies jointly released a report assessing the security risk of three things: electronic ballot delivery, electronic ballot marking, and electronic ballot return. Obviously, we're only talking about the last of those today. And to be clear, as C.J. mentioned earlier, electronic ballot return is what we're calling mobile voting here. For mobile voting specifically, the report concluded that it presented a high risk to United States elections and cannot be secured. The report noted that hackers from anywhere in the world could engage in large-scale, high-volume tampering with ballots that could impact results and possibly the outcome of an election. And just to reemphasize, the report was just reissued in 2024. Two of the agencies who were part of that report, an agency within the Department of Homeland Security and also the National Institute of Standards and Technology, have opined repeatedly over the years about the challenges and security risks over the years. Notably, NIST, that was the second of those entities, has been researching mobile voting for about 2 decades. In 2022, it issued a report specifically addressing voting barriers for people with disabilities. Among its many recommendations, it did not include mobile voting because, as it concluded, there remain significant security, privacy, and ballot secrecy challenges. The Defense Department also has taken a position against mobile voting, specifically stating it does not advocate for the electronic transmission of any voted ballot, whether it be by fax, email, or via the internet. Beyond the executive branch, the United States Select Senate Committee on Intelligence in 2020 proactively stated that states should resist pushes for online voting because no system of online voting has yet established itself as secure. One final report of note to share: an academic working group funded by Bradley Tusk, who C.J. referenced earlier, to determine the feasibility of standards for safe and secure electronic ballot return, instead concluded, and I'm quoting, "The current cybersecurity environment and state of technology makes it infeasible for the working group to draft responsible standards to support the use of internet ballot return in U.S. public elections at this time." It further stated, "When internet ballot return is employed, it may be possible for a single attacker to alter thousands or even millions of votes. And this lone individual could perpetrate an attack from a different continent from the one where the election is being held, perhaps even while under the protection of a rogue nation where there is no concern of repercussions." With that as your background, I will now turn things over to John Odom, who will provide information about some specific security issues. And you'll hear from me again in a little bit.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, so just really briefly, I do wear two hats in the world. One is as an election administrator, just as the city clerk in Montpelier. And this has so much appeal to me as an election administrator, just the sense of how it could help disabled voters, overseas voters. The hacker in me sees it, certified ethical hacker, as really dangerous. And I have to give the full hearing to that hacker part because it is too dangerous to implement. So what you're going to see as you hear the proponents talk about this is obviously a lot of the reasons why it's problematic, voting is problematic over the internet are pretty self-evident. But you'll hear that there's a sort of magic bullet called end-to-end verification, or E2EV for short. You'll hear that a lot. What that is it's a cryptographic paradigm. It's a cryptographic idea that says I can send something over a secure connection over the internet, and then I can check what I sent to make sure it's correct. It's a great technology. It works really well. It can be a great thing for low if you want to vote for who wins in Survivor, I mean the odds are fine that you'll be all right, and the stakes are low. But the problem is that it doesn't solve some of the fundamental problems with the encryption itself. There can be bad encryption. There's human error when you write encryption. That wouldn't change that. Encryption will eventually, even the unbreakable stuff is going to be broken eventually, usually by foreign actors giving it really the long haul. Now, it depends on the idea of people making sure, enough people checking their ballots after they cast them over E2EV to see that it's correct, to know that the system is secure. But number one, not that many people are going to check. But number two, what if you find a problem with your ballot? What if one of these problems, has occurred? What do you do without giving away your own vote? There's no conflict resolution there to work out who wins the issue. And if you do find an issue, you're talking about redoing an entire election. There's just no comparison to one polling place getting screwed up or a clerk losing a box of ballots in the vault that they forgot to bring out, and the kind of scale that a problem with an internet election could cause. Now, one way to look at this also is this E2EV secures the passageway, theoretically, between one end and the other. But the big problem you get then is malware, viruses, Trojans, things that you pick up on the internet from people being phished. We've all heard about phishing, clicking the wrong link on the email, getting a suspect phone call that directs you to click on a malicious link, going to a malicious website. There is nothing in this system to stop malware from getting onto your computer, from people being phished like any other way, like the way people lose their security with banking. There's a lot of talk of comparing this to online banking. And that makes the point for me, honestly, because we've heard about it. Online banking gets hacked. We don't want our ballots hacked. So malware can get in there. You can have malware that gets installed on a computer that can completely replace the app that you've installed to cast your vote, because you'll be voting through an app and not directly on a website. You can have it corrupted. You can have it direct you to a false website where you can be subject to identity theft, any number of things. And creating so many people that are voting on their phone, that creates a huge attack surface for phishing campaigns. And you don't have to have your vote changed to affect an election. You can also have your vote not count. You can also have your vote sent off into oblivion because of malware. And that, even the Mobile Voting Project, their new system that they've come up with, in their own threat report, they acknowledge that malware is a problem. And that comes from speaking with Joseph Canary, who's the one who came up with it. So the problems still exist. The fundamental problems are not solved by this E2EV, which is presented as a magic bullet. It's not. And that's sort of the simple version of the technical problems that you're facing when you talk about this kind of thing. Guess I'll hand it back over to Susan now.
Thank you, John. I'm going to take a second to, oops, I have to pull this up. Yep, to pull up my slides. Wait, where did they go? I apologize. Taking me a little bit longer.
Happy to switch with you if you'd like.
I think I'm ready now. I apologize. I made them go away when I was ready to start. Okay. So let's go to slideshow. Um, okay. So as John mentioned, and CJ explained, and Lisa touched on, there's a big push for mobile voting coming from this company called, or this entity called the Mobile Voting Project. And they have developed something called, that they're calling Vote Secure, which purports to be this magic pixie dust or this magic bullet that provides end-to-end verifiability that John talked about. But the thing about Vote Secure, as John mentioned, it was designed by a reputable computer scientist, but all it is a cryptographic protocol that can enable end-to-end verifiability, but it's actually like kind of not all the way baked. Some computer scientists have looked at it and found it's not really, it's still got some issues. It hasn't been peer reviewed, and most importantly, is it is not a complete voting system. All it does is layer on top of a mobile voting system a cryptographic protocol that could enable end-to-end verifiability, which has a lot of flaws in it, as John mentioned. And the Vote Secure people at Free and Fair, they were pretty clear about this. They say this is something you can build safely upon, and it's not a complete voting system. But if you're listening to Bradley Tusk and the Mobile Voting Project, you might hear a different story, because what they're representing is that the technology that they have developed actually acts as if a whole app, the app that you actually vote on, that you access your ballot through the app, that you authenticate your vote and then you vote it. And they say this in a bunch of different ways. We've seen this in a committee testimony in Vermont. We've seen this on their website. We've seen it in news interviews to the press and on podcasts. So there's a little bit of a smoke and mirrors where they're conflating what Vote Secure really is to make it sound like it's really a more fulsome product, and kind of hiding the ball that if you actually move forward and decide to adopt mobile voting, the state or the municipality or whoever is going to adopt this will also have to will have to purchase an actual mobile voting app. And the other thing is that really concerns me about the way they're promoting this product is we see, like I said, kind of the confabulation of the how the Vote Secure product works, but we've also seen a lot of press and statements about a claim that it's being used in Anchorage, and Anchorage is going to debut it. And this was actually even in the New York Times, and the New York Times said that Mobile Voting Project's new product is going to be used in Anchorage. But we've actually reached out to the clerk in Anchorage, and I've had a number of communications with them, and they've actually said, no, we are not using this product. They wrote me this email. I have several other ones that say we are not using the product from mobile voting or developed by Bradley Tusk. So there's this another level of misrepresentation, which I find somewhat concerning in this overall process. Another thing we hear often is that don't worry, we're going to print the paper ballot at the election office, and that will enable it to be auditable. But the truth is, what makes a paper ballot auditable is that the voter has verified that their votes recorded on that physical piece of paper are correct. That because, as John mentioned, you can see your vote recorded electronically on your phone, and it can be altered through malware or some other type of attack, and you would never know it. And there's a great quote from one of the NIST reports that Lisa had mentioned that talks about that it's not a matter of being able to audit it. Their errors will never be detectable if the person, by any type of audit, if the voter can't actually check the votes. And then just one other quick thing is that we're hearing that this is a representation of what the disability rights community writ large is promoting, and certainly there's a segment that I'm sure are promoting this. But there was a study done in 2023 by the U.S. Election Assistance Commission and Rutgers University that found that when voters were asked, how would you prefer to vote in the next election? There was only 15.5% of all voters of the general population said they would like to vote online. It got even lower when you went to anybody with a disability, and it dwindled down to 4.7% for people with a visual impairment. So this study shows a different side of that story. I'm going to stop now there and hand it hand it over to Akini, who's going to talk a little bit about some practical instances of using mobile voting or internet voting.
Hello. Just let me get my slides up. Everybody see them okay? Um, so there have been states or even a couple countries that have used internet voting. I think Estonia still does, but they don't have a fully private process, in the sense that ballots are associated with individuals there. There's also internet voting that is enthusiastically endorsed by Vladimir Putin in Russia. But beyond that, there have been some efforts to do internet voting that have had fairly predictable voter suppressive results. So this is a screenshot from Twitter, and sorry, I want to try to remove this bar at the top. I don't think I can. Um, they had a system in the state that Sydney's in Australia called iVote, and it was intended for people with disabilities, people in very rural areas, people overseas, folks who really do struggle to get their vote in on time by mail or to use mail-in voting, and we are all concerned about that. So this is a system that was meant to help bridge that, but it kept breaking, and so people would not be able to register or they would not be able to vote um, when that happened. So I just wanted to share these screenshots because it shows real people trying to vote and not being able to because they counted on a system that was supposed to be convenient in different years, and it didn't work. And so you got this built, unfortunately, um, over over a period. Um, And eventually it crashed so badly that 30,000 people called the helpline, weren't just unable to vote online, but called for help and got a sorry for the inconvenience message. And in Australia, you get fined if you don't vote. So people are quite motivated, right? But they weren't able to. And as a result, that election had to be rerun in 3 contests. And in order to rerun the election, the jurisdiction had to sue the winning candidates. And you had candidates crying in court because they couldn't afford to raise the money to run another election that they thought they had won. And it did cause a great deal of heartache in those 3 races, but there were also 19 races that were not rerun. But it wasn't clear that the number of people that had been unable to vote it may have tipped that election, those 19 elections as well. So chaos, right? When this doesn't work, people lose their right to vote. Um, and it's not acceptable, right? This is not an acceptable thing. There's no mailing in your vote on the day of the election. Um, so this is the experience of one of the candidates who was sued after she won in the first election and then had to run again. And you can imagine, and this is a fairly seemingly, I don't know these political candidates, but seemingly innocent situation and our charged atmosphere right now where democracy is on the line. Having this kind of disruption is not good. And there had been warnings about the system, just like I think we're doing our best to give warnings here that this is not a system that has been working well, and it's not a reliable system for decision making in elections. So some of the background there. And then it happened again. So this was 2021 in Australia, and then happened again for voters from Ecuador who are around the world. In this case, the government said it was uh, an attack from a number of different countries, not necessarily by them, but through them, that took the whole system down. So it was just off. And again, it actually forced them to rerun what we call the congressional or parliamentary elections because so many people who were expected to vote were not able to, which, kudos to them. Like in the US, when people aren't able to vote, we keep the polls open sometimes, but we don't actually try to restore those lost votes. So then they had to have people come in person and vote at embassies. So if you weren't living near an embassy, you basically lost your right to vote, even in the rerun. And there was unfortunately a lot of chaos and strife in Ecuador after this, not because of this necessarily, but it did not help. And so I just want to emphasize when people say this is not a reliable system, this is not a good idea, it's not just this abstract technical thing. It's real people feeling unheard, silenced, shut out of the system, the same people that we're trying to empower. When we try to make voting more accessible, you have to provide something that actually is going to work, that's actually going to lead to their actual voting choices being counted. And right now, that is not available in the market. And I think we'd all love to have more accessible options where the voters were verifying in some way their paper ballot that would be counted and could be audited and recounted if there were an issue, but that isn't an available option right now. Um, and we just want to make sure folks are aware. Thank you.
I believe it's back to me.
Sorry.
Hello again, folks. So you have now heard about the security issues and other challenges with mobile voting. But it's not just that there are those implementation and security issues, although those are obviously incredibly important. We also need to consider the current risk landscape. And so that's what I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes. For at least a decade, our foreign adversaries, including Russia, China, and Iran, have launched cyber attacks targeting the United States digital election infrastructure. Those are some hard words to put together, by the way, digital election infrastructure. They did so in the 2016, 2018, 2020, 2022, and 2024 federal elections with the goal of undermining confidence in our elections. And I think it's worth pointing out that in Akane's last slide about what happened in Ecuador, those cyber attacks came from foreign nations. Notice that at the bottom of the slide. So in that context, along with the fact that federal agencies have recently cut back significantly on the cyber and other election security support for state and local election offices, right? That creates a big problem. Collectively, there will be no federal government assistance in tracking, probing, or disrupting foreign interference in our midterm elections, for example. And with reduced information sharing among key stakeholders, election officials might not even be aware of or prepared for foreign threats. To make that more concrete, CISA is the agency whose task is to secure the nation's critical infrastructure from physical and cyber threats, and is the DHS agency that led the four-agency report I told you about earlier. Its election security activities have been frozen. DOJ's cut of about 130 of its workers included its election security advisors, and the support it provided for physical security of elections was eliminated. In addition, its employees who worked on foreign influence and disinformation teams were placed on administrative leave. Beyond CISA, the head of the National Security Agency and U.S. Cyber Command, again, someone who deals with cyber issues, was dismissed. These are all people who've given support to state and local jurisdictions in their elections. And just to add to that, funding was terminated for 3 different public-private entities that facilitated information sharing about security risks and best practices between election vendors and state and local election officials. Finally, I just want to note there is an active movement within the United States to undermine confidence in our elections, and it's unfortunately having some success. right? Like just yesterday, the LA Times reported on the nationwide bipartisan plummet among eligible voters in confidence that the upcoming midterm elections will be counted fairly. We should not give this trend oxygen through the use of an untested and unproven technology for which there are currently no federal security standards. So simply stated, within this context, it is not a good idea and not good for our elections to adopt the use of mobile voting. I am going to now pass it back to Akane, I think.
Hi. Yes. Um, so there is a bill before the legislature, and I put the bill in the Q&A. I'll put the bill numbers in the Q&A. I can put the bill numbers in the chat as well, and we can follow up with those of you who have attended and send you an action page if that's helpful to email your legislators and let them know if you have concerns about this legislation that would allow municipalities to undertake this. I think there's been really significant pushes we've seen, as described by Susan, to sort of not accurately represent what is being proposed, and we don't want to throw local elections into disarray. So we encourage you to call Montpelier and let people know, let your legislators know that you do not support these bills. In the House, it's 330, and in the Senate, it's 297. That's straightforward and pretty much it. I'll throw the number to call. You can leave a message for your legislators. And we greatly appreciate that if you're in support. I'll pass it to Susan.
Yeah, and I think we can start to take some questions. So the first question is from Anne. Since Trump wants to take away mail-in ballots, would he even want the use of mobile voting? I don't know. Lisa, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Um, no, he probably would not want mobile voting, in that in his executive order on voting, he has something requiring, there's a whole issue about authority, so I'm not going to get into that. But to the extent that an executive order is indicative of the mindset of our current president, the executive order purported to require paper ballots, and so no, he would not like that. Um, that said, um, regardless of what he would like or not, this is an issue of state law, and so it's important for us to talk to you all about the issue so you can form an opinion and weigh in with the State House on this issue. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that.
Yeah, I'll just add that, these bills are to allow internet voting or mobile voting for municipal elections in Vermont. And as Lisa said, no, Trump would not be in favor of this. But wherever this is, I would anticipate at some point it's going to draw a bullseye um, from this administration. So just one other thing that people probably don't want to deal with as a way to undermine elections. And Lisa touched on that in her talk a little bit. We have another question regarding Vermont town meetings. With those with floor voting only, and how can the town meetings with on floor voting only involve people with disabilities, older adults, parents with young children, and those with rigid work schedules participate in town meetings and floor votes? Is Zoom a possibility? What are options to make these meetings more accessible? Current data on the number of registered voters participating in town meetings with floor votes are very pathetic. And how can we improve participation? Is the Australian ballot the only option? And so I don't know, I think maybe John or Jonna might want to take that one.
I'm going to say that a lot of towns are thinking about this because people have less, lifestyles are such that fewer people can attend a town meeting in person than they could generations before. And I think town by town, um, other towns will be looking at it. Some towns have been switching from those in-person floor votes to a discussion meeting to air the issues, followed by Australian ballot. That's what my town of South Burlington does. Um, but there may be creative solutions that towns can come up with. The thing about a floor vote is that it's not confidential, so that if there's a way to do some kind of Zoom meeting, because then you could vote in front of everybody just like you would on the floor. I don't know. I think it's up to the creative people in Vermont to think about what they want town meeting to look like in this century.
Yeah, I'll just add really quick. This is just such a tough question because this is what we all want to see happen. The question is the cure worse than the disease? And I think it is. It's sacrilegious, but in response to the last part of your question, I'm a big proponent of Australian ballot. I think it increases participation. I think it creates anonymity. So yeah, that is a direction you can go. And we have, for that, what we do have, of course, is the most robust early voting system in the country. But we also have a situation where two justices of the peace can personally deliver a ballot to someone who can't make it to the polls while they vote, and then they can bring it back. I think a lot of us are doing curbside voting now, where if someone, can be brought over to the polls, they can be brought a ballot by a couple justices of the peace down there at the curb. So we're trying, and I don't think we're doing badly, but we need to do better. But this is just not the way to do it, unfortunately. Like I say, it's an elegant idea, but in principle, it's dangerous for all the reasons we've been saying.
Yeah. Um, so we have a great question from Kimberly, which is, what do you believe is Mr. Tusk's motivation for bringing this bill to Vermont? So I don't know, CJ, you want to take
I
a
don't know,
crack at
John,
that, and I
maybe
might follow you up?
John might have some more perspective there. Then I'll let him go first.
Well,
Okay, fair enough.
I spoke to Mr. Tusk last week, which is an interesting conversation. Let me just say that in all fairness, I think he is sincere. I think he has an analysis of what's wrong with the country is we don't have enough participation in primaries, and that this would be the sort of magic cure for that. I think he means that. Um, and I think he means that also having read his book um, to a degree that introduces some sort of willful blindness on his part. He doesn't really adequately respond to the concerns when presented in my sense of reading the book more than the conversation. But I do think he is sincere. I'm not going to say that he's not. He has put money into this, and he's just mistaken, and he's not open to hearing that, I don't believe.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, John, that we are seeing this effort not just in Vermont but in some other places, right, as well. And I think, John, as you point out, his belief and desire to fix uh, pieces of the system that he perceives as broken, and that this is the solution. Right, I think that really is his motivation. But again, for all the reasons that have been outlined here about the how this is risky and insecure, and it's not just us, saying it, that we have very credible other organizations, the executive branch, the legislative branch, saying these things as well. It's just not the answer at this time. But I think his motivation is there are pieces of the system that he sees as broken, that this particular thing is the answer. But this is not yet the answer for all the reasons that have been mentioned.
And if you break the system in toto, that works against fixing pieces of it if you break the whole thing.
And I'm not quite as generous as John or CJ, because what really concerns me are things that we see that are inconsistent with the facts. So, and this willful disregard for for the study that he commissioned at the University of California, Berkeley, that Lisa mentioned, and to come up with ways to do this securely. He was really gung-ho, and he was kind of getting tired of the computer scientists continually telling him this isn't secure, and the security experts telling him this is too dangerous. So he commissioned the study, and then the people that he hired or picked, who were very esteemed and well known in the field, came back and said this is too dangerous, this is insecure, and he just threw it aside and bulldozed ahead. And so I find that really concerning, and I also find the comments about Anchorage, when the people in Anchorage are like, we're not using that product. I find that concerning. I don't think I can assign motivation, but I can say that I have concerns about his representations. Um, so I will go on to the next question. Uh, do the panelists believe that any practically foreseeable online voting system would retain the security properties of our existing voting infrastructure, like paper ballots or mail-in ballots? I don't know, maybe CJ or Keeney? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a question. But sorry, go ahead.
And I can jump in and then others as well. So in the foreseeable future, is there a system that incorporates electronic ballot return that can be safe and secure? Um, Really, the honest answer is I don't know. We don't know that. It's um, verified voting is not an organization that says never. We're an organization founded by computer scientists. So show us the science, show us the data, prove that that it can be secured from the various different risks that have been outlined with electronic return or mobile voting, and and then perhaps maybe, but that is not today, and it's not tomorrow. What one of the reports that was mentioned earlier, um, uh, essentially, the scientific community has said that there's no known technology that solves these problems. And that's true today. There is no known developed technology that solves the issues associated with electronic ballot return. And until some technology is created that can solve these very fundamental issues to electronic return, including ballot privacy, voter anonymity, then that answer remains no. But that doesn't mean it should not be researched. It does not mean that smart minds should come together and continue to try and solve this issue. It just means it hasn't been solved yet. And we don't know when that day will come, but that's not today or tomorrow.
If
And
it's
I'll let
okay, I want
panelists.
to jump in a little.
Go ahead.
So I think it's important to just note two things. The first is I have all the confidence that every single person presenting on this webinar would love for there to be something that could be developed that's secure and accessible. That is something we would all like. And the fact that it doesn't exist is not for lack of trying. There has been research going on to try to develop something for, I think, over 2 decades. Susan probably can speak to this if she's interested at length, but you know, it's really not for lack of trying to come up with something. We all want to see something developed. It just hasn't been yet. So
And it's
I'll
not
be I'll
close.
be the wet blanket here. Is it just from a technical standpoint, given the nature of the internet, I don't ever see it working, honestly, but I'm open.
I'm one of the people who've been talking to people who are trying and poking at different systems that people want to see work, and that there's nothing, it's still in research phases, all the different ideas, and none of them are even tested enough to talk about. But we all feel this incredible pull that, it is difficult for some folks, particularly blind folks living alone or people in very remote parts of the world to get their mail-in ballot in. And we need to do absolutely everything we can to make that easier while we continue to interrogate this question.
There's a great analogy that has been made about internet voting or mobile voting, which is it's like Theranos, if you may have recalled the story of the blood testing company startup that was going to do all your blood testing from just a tiny drop of blood, and you wouldn't have to go and have a needle put in your arm and have vials and vials of blood taken. And you could go to Walgreens or CVS, they just stick your finger with a little prick. You wouldn't have to worry about a needle, and they'd be able to tell you everything you needed to know about your blood. And who wouldn't want that? It would be cheap and easy and wonderful, but the fact was the science actually couldn't support it. And I feel like that's kind of where we are with internet voting now. Um, there's a question from Betty saying John may be the best person for this. Does current law provide contingencies for circumstances like letting the SOS require that ballots continue to be collected and counted past election day if there are challenges like natural disasters or violence and public safety concerns at the polling places, or the possibility for throwing out results and implementing a new election in the face of findings of interference in the security and accuracy of the election? The Supreme Court in another country required a new election, but I don't think we would want to count on the Supreme Court to be in charge with those decisions for a Vermont election, and they may not have the authority anyway. So I don't know, John, do you
Well, I'm not
want to
sure what the
answer
laws.
that?
I don't think so. I don't think there's any. So I think something like that would be a matter not for the US courts, but for the state courts, since the states decide how elections are run. So I think if that were to come up, it would probably be something that would go into the court system, because I don't believe we have laws about that specifically, but I could be wrong.
Okay. And we have one more question. If anyone else has any other questions, go ahead. We put them in the chat. But Leighton says, wouldn't Trump love a reason to decertify voting re results due to a chaotic event? I don't know who wants to jump into that.
The League of Women Voters is nonpartisan, so we have no comment on any particular candidate or party.
Okay.
Same here.
Okay.
I think that I will jump in a nonpartisan way because I think that the the vibe behind that question gets to one of the issues I raised in the current risk landscape, which is that there is there is currently, right, there's an election denial movement in the country right now. There's a movement that seeks to undermine confidence in elections. And I think that any kind of, conceivably, there could be a push not to certify an election where there was an attempt to undermine confidence in it. And so I just want to say that, that is part of the risk landscape that I was referring to without it being specific to any particular candidate.
Right. I would agree that is part of our risk landscape right now, with questions of the people questioning the credibility of, we have a really great voting system in America. It's really great how it's dispersed among the states. All these things make it more secure. And so the falsehoods being spread or false accusations are really dangerous if they would undermine our faith in our democracy. And this online voting thing just tears a hole in our credibility because it would be a huge vulnerability.
Right, like I was saying before, let's not give oxygen to the movement.
So I think we have simultaneously run out of questions just about at the time when we ran out of time for the end of this. So I think we can thank everybody so much for joining us tonight. I don't know if anyone has any final closing words. I'll just thank you all for joining and thank all our panelists. And I didn't get to say this. I love Vermont too. I went to college there, so I love it also. I forgot to say that in my time. And so really excited to do any work in Vermont that we can. So thank you all for coming. And Akini put up the information about the bill, and if you want to contact me, I'll tell you I'm Susan at freespeechforpeople.org. And let us know if you have any questions. We can follow up with you. Or reach out to the League of Women Voters.